All right, everyone, you Brits over there in the UK are very lucky to have Boris Johnson as opposed to communist Jeremy Corbyn running the show over there with a now absolute majority that he didn't have before. He's now proposing that that he's going to rescind the licensing requirement for the BBC. So, right? There's an old meme. Oi, mate, you got a license for that? The idea is that in the UK, you can't have a TV without having a TV license. And this is considered hilarious in the free world because the idea that you would have to buy a license for the BBC when you might not even watch the BBC because it's just propaganda, the fact that taxpayers would have to prop up a so-called public non-biased edifice that is blatantly politically biased from the outside looking in is itself hilarious when you come to the conclusion that TVs are vestigial now and they're just internet synced anyway. It's like, are you going to have a laptop license because they're hooked to the same networks, or a cell phone license or something like that? It's like the idea is that it's like with that little placard, I guess, somewhere in London or whatever it is. It's like, oh, this is Orwell's homestead, and then there's a camera right above it. I don't know if that's real or not, but it's considered funny anyway. There's a lot of dystopian shit that goes on in the UK. It's a little bit more like Brazil than 1984. By the way, if you haven't seen Brazil, excellent movie. I believe from the mid-'80s, if I remember correctly, dystopian. If you like Animal Farm, if you like 1984, if you like the Soil and Green, any of this other stuff, dystopian shit, you'll love Brazil. It's a great movie. Anyway, I'd overlap it slightly. It's a little bit like Blade Runner, only much more dark and dystopian and British, if that makes any sense. It's the British version of Blade Runner. We'll just put it that way. Not really, but you get the idea aesthetically. The UK's got some problems going on with the idea of there's no free press. Like Tommy Robinson gets thrown in the dungeon for months because he happened to report on a rape gang trial. You don't have free speech. You say the wrong thing in public, the police will come and harass you. You're not allowed to defend yourself effectively. You get prosecuted for having the wrong political beliefs. It's dystopia. It's fucking shit. But now Boris Johnson's saying, well, the BBC has been so blatantly biased over Brexit, over the election and stuff, I'm just going to eliminate the licensing fee. Good, he should. But there shouldn't have been one to begin with. This should be a no-brainer for people on the left. Even people on the left, why would you consider it necessary that taxpayers there should have to buy a license in order to own a television? Why don't you just, modern technology is a thing. For those who haven't paid for their BBC licensing fee, why don't you just eliminate their ability to connect to BBC? Why don't you make that channel a bit unique? Look, nobody uses basic cable anymore anyway in the modern world, in the civilized world. Everyone uses the internet anyway. So why don't you simply block them from accessing BBC's newsfeed? So they don't have to pay to have their TV. They don't have to sign up with the government. Hey, I'm a good little stooge and I'm paying you my £10 or whatever it is a month in order to be able to watch propaganda. By the way, why are you even funding the BBC? It's meant to be funded specifically as an alternative to potentially biased news, but it is biased. I'm sitting there in the United States, or here in Amsterdam now, as an American, looking from a nonpartisan perspective, from a softly biased perspective. I am aware of my own bias and therefore able to temper it. I have my own libertarian leanings, but I'm able to acknowledge that I am biased politically. Most people aren't, by the way, capable of doing that. It doesn't matter if they're on the left or right, more authoritarian, more libertarian. Most people lack that introspection. Most people aren't capable of admitting the fact that, yeah, I'm biased. I am, absolutely, like everyone else. From that outside looking in at British culture, looking at what the BBC's got on like its fucking website alone, yes, it's biased. The wording is biased. The structure of the articles is biased. I could tear these articles apart. You'd find me 10 random political articles on the BBC. I'll write you a full report on exactly how it's biased. It would be easy. It is biased towards globalism as opposed to nationalism. And you can say that that's good or virtuous or moral, but it's still a bias. It's definitely biased towards the left wing of the economic spectrum as opposed to the right, probably because it's taxpayer funded. That's just the way it fucking works. It's no different from a bureau seeking to expand itself. The bureau will allow problems to slide in order to make reasons why it needs to have more of a budget. Government does this all the time. Government likes to make itself expand, and so anything that the government is guaranteeing through stealing taxpayer money will operate similarly. It can be a museum, a library, or a broadcasting institution. Again, you can argue that it is justifiable to taxpayer fund BBC. Well, it's so wonderful, and we get like, I don't know, Antiques Roadshow on BBC? I don't even know at this point. We've got these wonderful multicultural cultural programs, and we've got the gay drag queen story hour on BBC. Okay, that's wonderful. Okay, you're culturally enriching yourselves or whatever. That's fine. Taxpayer funded all you want. People should not have to pay a licensing fee to own a television because they may not be interested in watching BBC. And it's not costing the BBC, by the way, anymore to broadcast just because one more person is tuning in. That's not the way that cable systems even work. What are you talking about? At this point, most people are watching everything online anyway. It's handled through the internet. The idea of the TV is just a bigger screen at this point for your smartphone or your laptop anyway. It's just a more convenient one-place screen for people to watch the same shit on YouTube or Netflix or whatever that they watch elsewhere on their laptop when they're on the go. It's the internet of everything. The BBC, by the way, is vestigial anyway. Nobody needs corporate news, and nobody certainly needs state-run news. They should be getting their news from some YouTuber, from BitChute or something, or from a satirical Twitter handle. Dude, when The Onion begins to be more realistic than some of the so-called realistic news outlets like a New York Times or the Boston Herald, you know that society's got problems. That's a big problem in the US. It's also a big problem in the UK. And I've noticed culturally, a lot of Brits, they don't like to rock the boat. British people uniquely, they would rather deal with a little bit of shit than rock the boat because they're afraid there'll be more shit if they rock it. This is to their credit, mostly, but this is something on which you should definitely be backing Johnson. Yeah, you fucking eliminate the BBC entirely. The BBC is nothing but a wall of propaganda. It's funny because, again, people over here, like, they'll say, ma Russia. So they'll look at RT and say, well, it's state-run propaganda for the Russians. Absolutely. There's a reason that I don't really link RT articles. Half the time what they predict doesn't come true. I also don't like to consult the BBC for very similar reasons. It's just a British mouthpiece. It's a mouthpiece for the British left at this point. It's not going to be a mouthpiece for Boris Johnson's people because they want to defund it. No shit, they're going to be biased on political issues and try to tilt the balance in favor of people who are likely to give them more money and keep their licensing monopoly going. It's just the way that human systems work. That's, by the way, why we should have as much privatization, as much decriminalization as possible, and as much liberty as possible. States should be much smaller. They should be much more constrained. Enlightened, rational, intelligent individuals will tend to succeed regardless of circumstance. For everyone else, beyond the basics to make sure they're not dying in squalor in a gullet somewhere. Other than that, the state doesn't really have a function in day-to-day life and shouldn't. There shouldn't be any war for it to have to rattle swords for and raise troops for. There's no reason for it to grant licensing fees. There's no reason why weapons should be regulated. There's no reason why people shouldn't be able to smoke weed. Privatization can handle all of these issues much more efficiently. We say, for instance, I'll close this with something that has nothing to do with the UK particularly, which will vex some people. In the US, it's funny to see states' writers say, well, we have states' rights in the Electoral College to prevent too much tyranny from happening, so there'll be a patchwork of laws, and you can move from state to state if you don't like it. How much better would it be if municipalities and corporations and private individuals themselves and in groups were the ones that were that patchwork instead of just the states? Lower the common denominator even further, and instead of having 50 choices, you'll have 1,000,000 choices. I think that choice is a good thing, don't you? I think that the British people should have the choice to fucking chuck their TV out the window. But if they choose to have a TV, they shouldn't have to pay a fee for a channel most of them aren't watching anyway, because that's absolutely stupid. That's about all. Peace out.